It is our pleasure to introduce filmmaker Hao Wu, who will be joined in discussion with moderator Alison Klayman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to Double Exposure Film Festival and especially to Hao for sharing 76 days with all of us, with the audience, with the world. Hao is truly one of the smartest, the bravest, the most creative, clever, like pushing boundaries filmmakers that there is out there right now. And I say filmmakers, journalists, he's really, he would say storyteller, but in this case, he's so much more. And Hao, welcome. Thank you.
Okay, that's quite a compliment. I'm sweating already, Alison. Thanks so much for moderating this. Thanks, Double Exposure, for inviting 76 Days. And thank you, audience member, for watching this film.
So before we get into this discussion, I just want to let everyone know that the chat function that you have does work. We're going to accept questions, any questions that you have. We're going to talk, but I'm also going to see them and we'll be able to incorporate them. So please go in the chat and ask questions if you have them. And before we really get into it, Hao, there was some exciting news about the film and its future and the way it's going to reach people. So did you want to share?
Yeah, so yesterday we announced that MTV Documentary Films acquired the North America rights to 76 Days. So we're gonna start talking about distribution plan as well as maybe some awards qualification as well. So that's pretty exciting because for a long time I was working on this project in secret. So I wasn't talking to any founders or talking to any distributors. And by the time we premiere and TIFF, many streamers and distribution company, they had already committed to some other COVID film. So right now, to be able to find a strong partner in MTV documentary film as well, especially like the legendary Sheila Nevins, who's championing this film, I feel a huge relief. Definitely this film is going to be able to reach a wide audience.
When I was looking through my inbox to, find the link for this event and everything, the email like right before all the Double Exposure content was from you in June. It was like, secret COVID film. Do you want to watch? I've actually been doing this in secret. So I think that story itself is a really great place to start. And there's many parts to it. So I want to like walk the audience through a little bit how this film is actually a really personal film for you. So maybe it's even talk about how this pandemic intersected with your life. Maybe it's like starting at Chunjie and Chinese New Year travel plans.
Yeah, usually, Alison, you know me, I usually like to do character-driven films. I don't like to chase newsy topics. So COVID, back in January when there was rumors about new coronavirus in Wuhan, I didn't even register with me. But I made plan to fly back to Shanghai, spend Chinese New Year there with my parents. Our flight was supposed to leave on January 23rd. So 24 hours before our flight departure, we heard Wuhan was being put under lockdown. So we were in shock. We had planned to bring our two kids from New York to Shanghai. And because both my parents had cancer surgery last year, so I really want them to be able to spend the holiday time with their grandkids. But then once we heard about this, Wuhan lockdown, so we spent hours agonizing. Should we take the kids back? What's really happening in China? Nobody knew. But in the end, I, just flew back to Shanghai by myself. And because we didn't want to risk the health of our kids. So spending Chinese New Year in Shanghai, China's largest city of 21 million people, during coronavirus lockdown was really bizarre. I never had that experience before. The city, usually very busy during China's biggest family holiday, was completely deserted. So that was really shocking to me. But even at that time, coronavirus didn't feel very real. I didn't become real until really when the virus hit New York in March. But anyway, so after Chinese New Year, I flew back to to New York. And then a US network approached me and asked me if I want to make a film about coronavirus, the outbreak. So I was immediately intrigued. But then that project didn't happen in the end. So the network dropped its project. But by early February, anyway, I reached out to filmmakers who had been filming in Wuhan, and that's how I found my two co-directors.
So one of your co-directors is anonymous. So keeping that in mind, I do want to ask if you want to tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah. So one of my co-director is Weishi Chen. He's a video reporter for Esquire China, and he wasn't actually sent on an assignment to cover the Wuhan lockdown. As soon as he heard about the lockdown, he just jumped. He's like, I want to go find out what's happening. And he found his own way to embed himself with a medical team sent from elsewhere in China to Wuhan to help support the local hospitals. So he stayed basically in one hospital for, I don't even know, I lost count, for almost like 2-3 months during the entire lockdown pretty much. And my other co-director was anonymous. He was a local reporter working for a state media company, let's put it that way. Because he was a local reporter, he knew many of the hospitals. He found his own way in. He was ostensibly taking photos, right, for the media company he worked for. But then he started shooting video because he just found it so compelling.
It's incredible. How did it work then? You're sort of engaging them to perhaps help with this, larger US, network project. That project kind of doesn't happen. What was it? Were you just very, like, you couldn't give up the notion of working with these particular guys and this footage and doing this project? What was it that made you not give up at that point or not drop it, especially as the pandemic is now fully Europe and America, and you're sort of like, okay, this is is it the China story? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many junctures where you could have said, oh, I guess that didn't happen, and moved on. What made you stick with it?
Yeah, I think it's all very personal reason. My grandpa was diagnosed with late stage liver cancer right after Chinese New Year. Because I was working on the film, I was, trying to film in the US. At that time, I was thinking maybe the film would be some kind of with an international scope or perspective. For a while, I was thinking, contrasting, comparing New York and Wuhan's response to coronavirus. So I thought I had time to go visit my grandpa, but then I didn't really understood that liver cancer could progress so fast. By the time he was really sick in the hospital, because the travel restriction between US and China, it was really, really difficult to go back. And before I bought my ticket to go back, he passed away. So for me, for a while, I was thinking, I was saying to myself, I got to finish a film because I wasn't able to say goodbye to my grandpa. So in late March was the lowest point. The US network canceled the project. And also my two co-directors both stopped working with me because by that time, Trump was calling this a China virus, a Wuhan virus, and there's a lot of blaming China going on in this country. And China tried to fight back and really try to control the narratives about Wuhan's response coming out of China. So my two co-directors feel like not exactly threatened, just didn't feel comfortable working with someone who lives in New York. So they stopped collaborating with me. But then, yeah, so that was I thought I didn't have a film at the end of March, but I just keep on telling myself, I need to finish this. I need to finish this.
So at that point, well, I guess I just want to mention also for the audience, you actually have a way that you can meet Hao's family. He made a film that's on Netflix called All in My Family, and you can meet this amazing grandfather, the kids, his husband, everyone. And I highly recommend it. It's about 40 minutes long, and it's on Netflix called All in My Family. So, I want to, now that we kind of set up how it was that you ended up making it, we might come back to how you finished it. That's kind of how you started it. But as you're editing, like you mentioned, your films, you know, this is a departure for you in some ways. You've never made a film that is this kind of observational through and through, this kind of style. Why did you choose to do it that way here? And I want to hear about some of the choices you made in the edit. I think sometimes people mistake this kind of observational approach to sort of being very naturalistic, and actually it's like an incredibly calibrated, you know, every shot, every decision of characters, moments, angles, you know, it was a choice, and you weren't there to direct the footage, you know, too much. So the question is, you know, why did you choose to make it this way, and then what new challenges did you find yourself facing?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. During production, I had limited interaction with my co-directors. So back in February, early March, what they would do, they would upload their daily rushes onto a cloud, Baidu Cloud in China. So I would download it in New York across the Great Firewall. So usually it would take a couple of days for me to download the daily rushes, and then look at the footage and then have some basically just very high level casting discussions about which character to follow more. But then it was really hard to give them really good concrete advice because it was in the hospital, things are so chaotic, and you don't know how characters or stories gonna evolve. So they pretty much, they directed their shoots themselves on the ground. So coming to this approach, it just happened really fast because, when they stopped working with me, but I still had the footage, right? And then I was like during COVID sheltering in place, I had nothing else to do. I had no project going on. So I was just thinking maybe I should really dig into the footage and see if there's a film there. And if there is, maybe if I cut out something, I show it to them, maybe I can convince them to resume the collaboration with me. So basically I just directly dive into the footage. I follow the clips, the image, the scenes that left the strongest emotional impact on me. I just basically try to edit out scenes around those moments, and then I try to string them together to see if I have a film. And because I was trying to get something ready to show to them as soon as possible, so I was working really, really fast. And also another thing is that usually I will go back to do pickup interviews with the characters and to get to understand the characters better. But then in this case, I couldn't because my co-directors were not talking to me. I really couldn't ask them to go back and to do pickup shoots. And also the events itself, the lockdown already finished. There's nothing to really to go back and pick up anyway. So yes, I started editing scenes. I remember I was crying every day because the footage itself was so powerful. I'm like, how can I put this film together? And then because I had this kind of creative challenge, I actually went back. I watched a lot of films. I watched, Frederick Wiseman's film. I watched, Ramona Diaz's Motherland. I also watched Kristen Johnson's Camera Person. So these are all beautiful, verite observational films. So once I go back and watch those, I got an inspiration. Maybe my new film could be just like that. So that's when I made a conscious decision to do observational rather than trying to tell in a very newsy way what happened during the 76 of lockdown. So I just went back to say the best footage out of the stuff that my two co-directors shot were those kind of really emotionally impactful personal moments. Maybe let me just try to focus on those personal moments and tell an emotional story using very observational cinema rather than trying to tell the 76 days of lockdown beat by beat, like day 1, day 2, day 3, what happened. So yeah, once I reached that, decision, it was pretty liberating because I'm no longer limited by how I'm gonna sort of construct a really tight narrative per se. It's basically following the emotional flow, how I can get viewers on an emotional journey by, looking at these characters.
And yet this film is opening up investigative documentary festival. There may be a lot of reporters watching. What are some of the uh, details you think come out in this film that really are, you could say are revealing, are newsworthy, are kind of going deeper in a way that maybe people weren't getting from their regular media diet?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reason double exposure program this because it adds a missing piece to a lot of the COVID discussions or narratives. Because here, you at least here, right? I live in New York. We consume a lot of news media. We talk about COVID either in some kind of statistic sense. We talk about numbers. We talk about impact on the economy. We spend a lot of time talk about the political divide, but a lot of times we actually haven't got a chance to really look at the personal experiences, especially in a visual format. We've had podcasts, we've had radio reportings about COVID stories, but really the visual pieces is really missing. So I think one of the reasons I was really drawn to the footage, and one of the key reasons I decided to follow the creative approach used in this film is that I was shaken when I first saw the footage because I feel I was so close to the front line. Now I finally understood what COVID was like. Even when I was in Shanghai, right, during Chinese New Year, I was walking out, I was the rebel. Even though my family said, you cannot go out, there's a lot of virus out there, I still walked out trying to, it wasn't real to me, until I saw the footage. So that's why I made this film trying to make it really raw for people can almost feel like they are there to witness what's happening on the front line. So I think that's the value. That's also the power of the film. I want to preserve. That's why I decided not to use, sort of like adding a lot of newsy pieces, news clips or social media archivals, because I feel those has been well covered in the media. What I want to do is something new. That's something supplementary to what's being talked about.
One of the audience questions is about whether there was a character who you were immediately drawn to, but ended up didn't making the cut.
There are many characters actually, and so when I first started editing this film, it was a pure group portrayal. So, some of the current quote unquote main characters you can follow through the film, they appeared less frequently, and there are a lot more other characters giving oral testimonials to what they went through. It was really harrowing because I remember when I was even going to organize the footage, organize what each character was saying in front of camera, I was constantly in tears. So I really wanted to include a lot of their testimonials inside the film, but then in the end, I had to cut back because this being a film, you want audience, and also everybody's already in PPEs, right? And we're wearing masks. It's really hard for our viewers to follow the characters. So during the edit, I gradually let some of the main character reappear and higher frequency. For example, I took out most of the one-off character who just appear once and talk in front of camera. And secondly, I feel like I still want people to focus on their experience being there rather than spend a lot of time trying to listen to stories. So those are those are the moments I cut out, which I still miss them, but I think for the good of the film, as a piece of artwork, I think that probably was a good decision.
Is there any character you want to call out or just like give an overview of like what their testimony was or what their storyline was? Here's a chance to share it with some audience.
Yeah, for example, we actually, so in addition to what the two co-directors shot in the hospital, I also asked them when they had time to film outside of the hospital. Some of the volunteers, one of the volunteers, I really like him. He was feeding cat, being abandoned. Some of their owners being locked outside of Wuhan. They couldn't come back in. Their cats were starving. So there were volunteers who climb over gates at night to go inside people's houses to feed hungry cats. So there was one thing I cut in the early cut was really beautiful. I cut it out. And then there's another one, and it's a guy whose father contracted COVID while he was going through some other surgery, minor surgery in a hospital in Wuhan in early January. And his father passed away. And this guy was so angry, he wanted to sue the government. So he's been taking a lot of media interviews, even in the Ai Weiwei Wuhan documentary. He was one of the main characters there. I interviewed him. I found his story and his love for his father absolutely moving. We tried to cut his interview into our film early on, but in the end, we just cut his story out because just stylistically, it's just so jarring. So that's another character we cut out. But luckily, I saw that his footage, his clips, video of him appeared in some other films about Wuhan.
Yeah, so then you didn't have to stay up at night worrying about, should I have put that one in? A question from the audience, which is a good reminder of where we wanted to go to close the circle. So as far as you've told the story of making this film, your co-directors are still not talking to you, but you are editing the movie. So pick that up for us. Tell us how you reconnected and how that all went and how you were able to premiere it.
Yeah, so I think in early June I had a rough assembly, and so I sent it over to my two co-directors. I think it's at that time they finally saw where I want to take it with this film, which is a very humanistic portrayal of how people trying to survive the lockdown in Wuhan. So I think it fairly quickly Wei Shi came on board because Wei Shi, for a while, he wanted to do a feature documentary himself based on the footage he shot. I was helping him as well on that. I just told him in the end, like his footage, he didn't have enough footage to do a feature. I was like, why don't we combine forces and you can combine with anonymous footage, then we have a great film. And so he quickly came on board once he saw the rough assembly, how I was planning to use his footage. With Anonymous, it took a lot longer. I think in the end, he just took pity on me because he saw, really seriously, he was like, you spent months working on this. He appreciated, what I put in. He clearly saw the way I edited was exactly the way he shot it because his camera was so sensitive when he shoot the people's faces and people's how nurses holding grandma's hand. It's really sensitive and tender. So he saw I completely got what he wanted to do when he was shooting the video. So I think he just said, okay, I'll let you do license my footage to make this film, but don't mention my name because God knows if he will get into trouble, if not with the government, maybe with some nationalistic internet trolls in China. If we're not portraying, if they consider our portrayal of the lockdown as too dark, for example. So I feel extremely lucky. So we continue talking. I didn't sign the licensing agreement right before TIFF announced their program. So I feel very fortunate.
How did your thoughts about what the story of COVID was, change from, the beginning of this process until now?
When I first started working on this film, because I was in Shanghai, I was just like the rest of China, I was really confused. What happened? Why it got this bad? I was angry. Everybody else in China was angry. The horror stories came out of Wuhan was relentless. And so I wanted to do an investigative journalist piece to find out what's the origin of COVID, right? I think several other filmmakers I talked to in China, they wanted to do the same thing. But later on, two things happened that I abandoned that approach. The first one is, it's really hard to find out to find out definitively what happened. Even when the COVID infection started circulating in Wuhan, there's some, even scientific community haven't reached a conclusion yet, right? And secondly, I just feel like once it came to New York, I was in New York when it hit. I saw how underprepared New York was as well. I saw how hospitals in New York City were overwhelmed. Medical workers also were lacking PPEs, and CDC totally messed up testing, even with the evidence coming out of China that this virus was so deadly. The government didn't do enough to prepare themselves, to prepare the country for it. So I guess at that time, that point, I had almost like awakening. Is like, what? Maybe it's too early to point blames exactly, or even evaluate who did what right or wrong at this time, because we're still living through it, right? So each country, like even in the early days, people were saying Korea did a good job or Japan did a good job. Maybe 2 weeks later, they have an outbreak, right? They will say government did a bad job. So that's kind of got me thinking into trying to find out, maybe I want to get away from the investigative or political commentary angle. Maybe what I want to do is to find out what truly happened on the front line. And because I had these amazing footage as well, showcasing the humanistic individual story. So that's when I decided to really focus on the human angle. And also, you know, after editing this film, I was truly moved by the stories they captured and we built together. It's as dark as it was during the lockdown. There was so much human kindness and even like hope, right? That we can live through this together. So yeah, my whole view about our collective response, how can we deal with this better, completely changed during the making of this film.
And in the end, what do you see? And this will be our last question since we're almost out of time. I'm going to combine my wrap up with also something from the audience. You know, there's a question about how your co-directors view the global impact of this work. You know, from the closing of Wuhan until now, you know, so much has changed and now their films out in the world, and they were kind of at the front lines of something, and some of them were picking up a camera, you know, a camera to shoot video almost for the first time, you know, to then this. Like, do you have anything you could say about how they are viewing the impact of their work? And also for you personally, like, what's the, you know, in some ways you let go of the idea of doing something incredibly, you know, timely or like, you know, right on the cutting edge, and I think instead you've produced something that's really timeless and really, you know, stands the test of time. And what do you want people to kind of be able to see in this film going forward?
Yeah, I think for my two co-directors, Wei Shi, because he wants to make documentary, feature documentary film. This is his feature documentary debut, so he's truly proud. With Anonymous, he watched the cut. He knew where I was going, but then he didn't have that much say. He said, "I'm happy for you that you made this," and I think, to be honest, for both of them, they kind of wanted to leave COVID behind, because it was such a traumatic experience filming on the front line. And so they both have moved on to work on other non-COVID related projects. So for them, they probably like this film is a nice, cool wrap up of their, you know, harrowing experience in Wuhan. For me personally, yeah, I think it's too early to tell how long this film can stand the test of time. Obviously, I would like it to last longer. Future generation can look back, and when they look back and trying to understand COVID-19, they can look at this film as, you know, among many other films that's definitely coming out next year, as a way to understand how people cope with it, how people deal with it. If anything, you know, in America right now, we're still like in denial of COVID. So I'm hoping this film can get out soon. Just like, first of all, to remind people that take it seriously. You know, you really don't want to send any of the, you know, infect anybody you know, and with them ended up in the hospital. Secondly, I also want to remind people this is a global pandemic. We'll have to work together, help each other to live through this. Let's not trying to view people who have different viewpoints from you are as the enemies. Let's all try to survive this together first.
Thank you so much, Hal, for this conversation, for this incredible film, for not giving up, for editing the film, without consent for a while, and then convincing everyone that it was as brilliant as it is. And I think people, if you want to know more about how the film comes out, there's a website, 76daysfilm.com, that'll have information. And if you're looking for how to tell other people about the film. And thanks to Double Exposure.